as we have gotten better as dairymen, and we're not afraid to admit that, we've learned a lot over the past 25 years of being in Kansas. We've learned a lot over the past 100 years of our family being in the dairy industry. What we've really begun to recognize is that the long-term limiting factor of our success and of the productivity of our farms really is the cow's genetics. So we've partnered with the team at Zoetis to utilize their genetic testing platform, really to help us focus on continuous and rapid improvement of our genetic base.
Today on the Uplevel Dairy Podcast, we are here at McCarty Family Farms, and you'll be hearing in a moment from Ken McCarty and how they are taking genetics to an entirely new level to create cows for the future. You'll be able to learn how they have implemented genetic evaluations from Zoetis Clarifide Plus to create the cows that are working hard and being sustainable here today, and how they're positioning themselves and their relationship with Danone North America for the future.
This episode is brought to you by Zoetis. As the world's leading animal health company, Zoetis is dedicated to helping producers achieve healthy animals, healthy dairies, and healthy food through their world-class portfolio. For more information, visit dairywellness.com.
Here we are, McCarty Family Farms today, and this is one of multiple sites, tens of thousands of cows that are part of this operation, but through 4 generations of being dairymen, 100 years of being dairymen. One of the consistent things about the way that your family has approached the dairy business is with a very progressive mindset, but that also includes a focus on genetics. So as you've grown and scaled at this operation, how has that genetics focus played into your overall goals?
Well, genetics are obviously, well, I should say the cow. The cow is obviously the foundation of everything we do, right? So as we have gotten better as dairymen, and we're not afraid to admit that, we've learned a lot over the past 25 years of being in Kansas. We've learned a lot over the past 100 years of our family being in the dairy industry. But as we've become better and better at what we do, or we hope we become better and better at what we do. What we've really begun to recognize is that as our farms have improved, as our nutrition has improved, as our management strategies have improved, the long-term limiting factor of our success and of the productivity of our farms really is the cow's genetics. So we've partnered with the team at Zoetis to utilize their genetic testing platform. We work with a variety of different industry partners really to help us focus on continuous and rapid improvement of our genetic base. And we kind of break down our genetic strategy into a multifold approach of genetic advancement. Some of that includes the utilization of beef semen. We know we have a lot of cows that we need to milk here, but we know that we don't want to always propagate that genetic line. So breeding the beef semen is a great way for us to keep the pens full, but keep the wheel of genetic progress spinning as fast as possible. Part of that is selective use of very high-end sex semen to create the kind of females that push the tip of our genetic bell curve out farther, faster, as well as things like the utilization of embryos. We're just getting involved in using internally created embryos to take some of those bottom end animals and hopefully put their offspring from the bottom end of that bell curve clear to the top.
So when you talk about that piece of being able to really create more of the kind of cows that you want here to serve you well today and serve you well into the future and speed up the advancement of that process, describe to me the ideal McCarty Family Farms cow today.
Yeah. So, it's interesting. That's kind of changed over the years. Our goal is to sell milk, right? So we always really heavily focus on production traits. Not only production traits on the fluid milk side of things, but also on components, butter, fat, and protein. But we're also trying to breed for a conformationally correct, moderately framed animal that walks on great feet and legs, carries a great udder, is highly resistant to a variety of different diseases, and is reproductively efficient. And we also have a heavy focus on things like A2 genetics and an eye on novel traits such as, methane efficiency and pull genetics, all those sort of things that we think can help drive value to our genetic offering to the industry. But really one of the key components that we focus on as well is centered around feed intake. Simply because feed intake is such a huge part of our carbon footprint, it's such a huge part of our overall cost, and it's such a huge part of what we do in our local community every day. Having an animal that's more feed efficient is ultimately a win on a multitude of different fronts.
And so when you look at Zoetis Clarifide Plus and what it's opened up for you and McCarty Family Farms and the opportunity to seize those things that are valuable now, but even more valuable into the future.
Yeah.
Where do you see the progress? Have you been able to see progress you've already made since having evaluations that aren't just numbers, but that are actually management and decision-making tools?
Yeah. So, it's always nice to see an animal hit a leaderboard list, whether it be a production leaderboard list or a high DWP heifer or a TPI list. We know that we don't have the highest level of genetics in the industry. We don't have the showiest of cows in the industry. But if we can find a way to be the first into a new area of the genetic world, then inherently we are the best, at least for a short time until the industry catches up. But that's part of our genetic strategy as well, is to not only create animals that are great foundation animals for a sustainable herd and a sustainable future, but also animals that may be novel in certain areas. Because inherently we feel that as rapidly as the industry is changing, we need to always be taking segments of our herd and putting them in the position to deliver on those unique needs and wants of the future dairy industry.
So there, looking at the future, let's look 10 years out.
Yeah.
And you just mentioned some of the core fundamental traits that you focused on here, from components to stature to health traits.
Yeah.
Then you also touched on things like A2, you touched on feed efficiency, methane reduction, some bigger picture types of traits.
Yeah.
So when you think about the ideal McCarty Family Farms cow 10 years from now, what do you think she's going to look like on the inside and the outside?
So, in our particular world, I'll go to the outside first. So first, she's going to be Holstein. First, she's going to be, moderately framed. She's going to have great feet and legs, great udder, good body capacity. Perhaps she's going to be polled. Those sort of kind of key traits that we're really probably never going to deviate away from that type of core philosophy. But on the inside, that's where I think the magic is going to happen in the future. We're really going to try to be pushing into highly feed efficient and perhaps highly water efficient animals. And obviously that feed efficiency trait translates in where we're at in Western Kansas, and we're heavily dependent upon irrigated crops. That feed efficient animal is inherently a water efficient animal. So as we look 10 years down the road and we recognize that climate change is real and happening around us as we speak, and stressors on water and feed availability and things like methane production become a bigger and bigger topic for the global dairy industry and the global food industry, those are traits that we're going to spend a lot of time really trying to sharpen our focus on and drive a lot of progress very quickly in our herds on, because we believe that the long-term dairies of the future are going to have no choice but to be highly sustainable dairies that are positively impactful on the environment. And one of the ways in which we're going to get there is through the genes of that cow.
So speaking of genes, you have been doing genetic evaluations and collecting genomic data for several years now, including specifically through Zoetis' Clarifide evaluations.
Correct.
So what has that data revealed to you?
Well, some things that I'm maybe a little bit embarrassed to talk about. When we did some of our initial genetic evaluations and genomic testing, what we discovered is that we were running about a 28% parentage error. So how can we ever drive the appropriate rate of genetic progress, reduce inbreeding to levels where we want them to be, make the types of breeding decisions that will propel our business and our farms forward with that type of error inherently built into our systems? So those types of things that are really management based and fundamental things that you should be getting right every day, we were getting wrong. And that was one of the first key learnings that we found. Beyond that, what we've really found is that we do have, hey, we're a large herd, right? And we hope to be a large herd of excellent, great cattle. That being said, we have a pretty wide range of cows within our herd. And what we've discovered through the use of genomic testing is that we have some strengths and some deficiencies in our herd. And being able to sharpen the focus on those types of traits where we may be weak, that are important to us, or that we may be strong in, that we can celebrate with our teams, those sort of learnings are really important for us. We always have a drive to minimize inbreeding coefficients. We always have a drive for genetic improvement. But as we've tried to take genetics and move it from just a piece of what we do every day and transition it into an actual business center, or hopefully a profit center of our business, having that genomic information and being able to isolate those animals that have a unique set of traits or are very high-end animals in terms of various indices, that unlocks the capability and the potential for us to create an entire new avenue for our business and our farms.
So tell me about that avenue.
Yeah.
What does that look like?
So, for us, we want to take a very broad approach to how we create value out of our genetics. First and foremost, it's making high quality milk every single day in a sustainable fashion on our farm. But beyond that, it's really trying to find ways in which to create embryos that are of value to the industry, and not just the US industry, but to the global industry. It's also finding animals, live animals that are of high value and of interest to the industry. So our approach to using genetics as a means of driving value back to our farm really starts with everyday improvement, the utilization of beef semen, and then the identification of high-end animals to either collect embryos from and animals that may be of value to sell. Long term, where we want to go with that is to create a profit center out of our genetics, but also to try to find ways to increase the value of all aspects of our genetic program. So there's a lot of new areas that we're trying to explore and push into that are going to drive value back to us. Some's going to be economic value that we can recognize quickly. Others going to be long-term value that we're going to recognize over decades.
So to put all the pieces of this puzzle together, what I'm hearing from you, Ken, is what genomic testing and these evaluations have unlocked for McCarty Family Farms. At the most basic level, it started with identifying accuracy of parentage, so that you could have that foundational piece in place to then go to the next step. And that was really digging into these traits to create the cows that you wanted more of here, and to be able to capitalize on your strengths and also identify those weaker areas, but then also to look at how you can take this work here and expand it to your impact really as, let's call you a breeder herd, to be able to propagate genetics for other dairies to use. And I know one of the areas that you've been receiving recognition for in breeding, when you look at Holstein Association, USA, Dairy Wellness Profit Index. What has that unlocked for you?
Well, first and foremost, you can't manage what you don't measure, right? So genomic testing allows us to measure a great deal more information on our farms and then manage it more appropriately. But as we try to drive our business forward and the genetics of our farms forward, it's really a team effort, so working with the team at Zoetis, working with the team at Select Sires, working with the team at Holstein Association or Transova, all those people play a role in trying to drive our business forward. And everybody loves, I love going to Expo and I love seeing some of the best cattle in the world. That may not necessarily be the motivating factor behind our farm, and that's okay because everybody has a role to play within the dairy industry. But what we're really striving for is cows that are conformationally correct, because we all love pretty cows, right? Everybody involved in the dairy industry loves beautiful cows. We are no different. Beyond that, trying to drive forward our genetic offerings. But at the end of the day, recognition is not a necessary for us, but it sure is a nice to have. And it helps us kind of level set to understand that the strategies we are deploying are effective and they are working, because we are creating some very high-ranking animals. We are creating more excellence every time we classify. We are creating animals that are recognized as production leaders. You know, it's an industry-wide comparison with some of the best dairymen in the world to be able to help us understand where we rank within that. And we've got a long ways to go, but we're really proud of where we've come so far.
And when you look at those ways to be able to measure that progress, whether it's through rankings or just being able to look at production records. And as you said, it's less about an award, more about being able to have a standard of your own measurement. That feeds into it. You guys are the largest registered Holstein herd?
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Yep. Why has that been important to you all of these years?
So, you know, there's a variety of different reasons why our relationship with Holstein and why our efforts towards classification and registration matter to us. First and foremost, it's an independent third-party view of the quality of our cows and the genetic progress of our cows. We really value having people that are smarter than us in the room with us, telling us where we can improve. But beyond that, you know, there's a level of accountability, there's a level of traceability that comes to registration. There's obviously a comparison between some of the best breeders in the industry and in the world that we get access to through our work with Holstein, and that's really important for us. You know, and it's a way for us to recognize progress over time beyond just the absolute wealth of knowledge that Holstein brings to our farms, and the very independent view and the innovative way of thinking that, you know, that the conversations that we have with them that are kind of blue sky conversations, that's of huge value. But it's also, you know, like I mentioned before, that boost of optimism we get every time we have a classification done on our farm, or every time we have a heifer or a cow hit a leader list, just makes you feel good.
So there's a little bit of a morale booster for you and the team when you're able to look at that data.
Absolutely.
And you've mentioned, Ken, too, you look at genomics and the opportunities it's brought forth, it is about advancements and faster genetic advancements. So when you take that piece and you lay it next to tangible and collected data and metrics, as you referenced, you're able to gather from Holstein and through records, what stands out in your mind as what genetic progress looks like on paper? Are there some wins that you've been able to capture from that data that translate into what you see in those metrics today? Yeah,
hey, 100%. You know, so the thing that I think oftentimes is top of mind for all dairymen is what goes in the bulk tank, right? So through what we have seen with regards to our rate of genetic progress, our sharper focus on genetic improvement and varieties and cow families and those sort of things, you know, hey, in the past 15 years, we've increased almost 25 pounds of milk per cow per day. Now that may be kind of honesty bordering on the point of stupidity and saying that we weren't doing a very good job before, but what we recognize is that our cows are healthier, more productive, create more pounds of components every day, are more reproductively efficient, and are, from a conformation basis, light years beyond where they were a decade ago. You know, we grew up milking 150 cows in northeastern PA in a highline pipeline tie stall barn. You know, a lot of shoveling work. You know, strong backs as kids, but. When we moved to Kansas, our farm grew. We always have desired a deeper connection with where our product goes, a deeper level of accountability with who our product serves. And ultimately, we found that in our partnership with Danone. And that's led to a tremendous amount of growth for our family, but it's also led to a tremendous amount of growth in areas that we never really would have considered. But that being said, we have the really good fortune as McCarty Family Farms to have a little bit of a peek behind the curtain, so to speak, in terms of where our products go, what our products are used for, consumer sentiment around our product. So in that regard, we feel very fortunate that sometimes our crystal ball is a little bit clearer than what it would be otherwise.
What else is on the horizon? What do you see coming down the pipe?
Yeah, hey, the thing that comes top of mind for us is sustainability. We believe that is really going to be a license to operate for farms into the future. We know that we're not perfect, but we're striving for improvement every day. But first and foremost, the thought that comes to mind when I think about things that are going to be flat out a requirement for farming of the future, it's going to be centered around sustainability. What we see is that food companies want a stable supply. They want traceability, and as much traceability as we can deliver, they'll take.
Okay, so sustainability. You touched on several aspects of that word and several ways that it plays into what you foresee in the future based on how your eyes have been opened through the Danone partnership. Speak for a moment to sustainability and how that plays in to the genetics you're using on your farm and what that looks like.
So one of the biggest areas of emissions and one of the largest parts of our carbon footprint of our farms is really centered around feed. So our ability to impact the feed efficiency and the feed intake of our cows through genetic selection is a huge factor in our farms. On top of the fact that obviously feed is going to account for 60% of my budget. So a more feed efficient animal creates a more sustainable business model for me as well. And as I mentioned before, we're always striving to create a more efficient, more productive animal, but we never lose sight of the fact that we're always trying to create an animal that's healthier. A healthy cow is better for the world, better for my farm, better for my teams, and better for her herd mates and better for herself.
And that's a whole nother definition of sustainability.
Got it.
Absolutely, absolutely. And speaks to the power of what genomics and genetic evaluation, and not just having the data, but having the support team to help you take that data and make it matter today and 25 years from now. Yeah. So Ken, been great to catch up with you.
Likewise.
on the progress of not just McCarty Family Farms, but the progress of these cows that we're standing in front of right now.
They're the ones that really matter, But also, what really matters is how the cows perform every day. So things like milk production, which, hey, over the past 10, 12 years, we've increased almost 25 pounds of milk production per cow per day. Component levels have increased nearly 3 pounds per cow per day. And maybe that means that we weren't necessarily the best dairymen 10, 12, 15 years ago, which could likely be true. But that being said, what we know is that we can't manage what we don't measure, and being able to manage or measure the genetic progress and the genetic makeup of our herds has allowed us to increase selection intensity and drive progress that shows up in the bulk tank.
This episode is brought to you by Zoetis. As the world's leading animal health company, Zoetis is dedicated to helping producers achieve healthy animals, healthy dairies, and healthy food through their world-class portfolio. For more information, visit dairywellness.com.